So Frank was in the control room with an SM7 and looking at us. And what would end up happening is I'd just sort of run in the control room, check all the mics, check everything's rough, check drums are still tuning's all right, check everything's sounding, everyone's headphones are good. Run back, hit record, run back in the room, pick up the guitar, and go for it, basically.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of The Record Process. This week, our journey takes us across the pond as we sit down with mixer, producer, and bassist Thomas Mitchener. We discuss the formation of UK rock giants Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, and we also dig into the under-the-radar creation of the band's 2015 debut album, Blossom. Thomas not only recorded the album, but also lent a hand playing bass as the band tracked most of the record live in the studio together. We delve into how creating the album in secret relieved a lot of the pressure and expectations that normally come with creating a body of work, and how the long-lasting relationships between all of the musicians involved created a free-flowing and easy recording process. Mitchener also delves into their ambitions to create an alternative rock sound unlike anything being released at the time, implementing unique recording methods and even recording off-click in certain tracks. The story behind this record magnifies the power of getting back to the basics in the studio, and it's all coming up right now. The task of making a great album is rarely a solo endeavor, and companies like Audio Movers help empower musicians and creators by streamlining their workflow together and enabling them to make more efficient and informed creative choices. Famous for their groundbreaking collaborative plugin tool, Listen To, Audio Movers have made it possible to stream audio files in real time directly from your DAW to anyone, anywhere in the world. And recently, Audio Movers have expanded their dynamic plugin suite with Inject, an impressive audio routing solution that allows users to route audio in and out of any channel in your DAW. And alongside Inject stands the newly updated Omnibus 2.0, a software application that turns your Mac into a virtual patch bay, making it possible to route audio between applications and hardware seamlessly. And you can get 25% off Inject and Omnibus right now by heading to audiomovers.com and entering the code RECORDPRO at checkout. So as you already know, we do a lot of talking about the creation of original music here on The Record Process. I mean, that's kind of our thing. But it can also be fun to put your own spin on an old classic and tell the world something else about yourself through something like a cover song. Cover songs can be a really interesting way to connect with your existing fan base, or even a way to put yourself in front of new audiences through shared musical tastes. And our friends at DistroKid have made it super simple to upload a cover of your favorite song while allowing them to handle all of the back-end licensing work that can really be a headache for independent artists. DistroKid will notify the composer and publisher of its release, they will pay the necessary licensing fee, and they will take care of all the other legal red tape involved with releasing a cover song on a streaming platform, allowing you to fully focus on enjoying the process of putting your unique artistic spin on that recording. If you're already a DistroKid member, you can access this as you're uploading your track for $12 a year per song. Or if you're not yet a member and you'd like to sign up for DistroKid, you can use the link in our show notes to get 30% off of your first year's membership. Mr. Thomas Mitchener, welcome to The Record Process. Thank you so much for being here, buddy. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. Yeah, oh, well, I'm really good. Just getting ready for the British winter at the moment. It's suddenly got freezing cold today, so it's why I'm sitting here in my jacket and jumper and whatnot. But yeah, no, all is well. All is good. I can't complain at all.
Amazing. You know what? I happen to have it on good authority, having just come back from the UK a few weeks ago. It does that, huh? It gets cold, it stays wet, and then it gets colder, still wet. Yeah. So yeah, you got to bundle up. Yeah.
We had quite a good summer. Quite a good summer. But yeah, it's definitely hit that point where it's I just keep going out out completely unprepared. So yeah, no, it's I'm trying to get into my head that it's no longer summer. It's absolutely freezing out.
Right, which is actually kind of the perfect time for people in your profession, because now you no longer need an excuse to hibernate inside of your new studio that you're putting together. Because then you be like, why would I go outside? It's shit weather outside, mate. Full disclosure, yeah, you mentioned a new studio space and everything where you're coming to us from. What's the deal with that before we dive into this record at hand?
Well, it's literally just been finished, and it's sort of treated or anything yet. But it's I work in a studio in Watford, which is probably about an hour's drive from where I live now, which is fine. But when you need to do that trip to do anything, any editing, comping, you can. I've got 2 very young children, so trying to do that in the house and stay focused was just becoming impossible, as well as just the general, if I do some mix points, it's hour each way to get back. So after a lot of planning, I've basically got a little sort of mixing editing room down the bottom of my garden that was made and finished a little while ago. So it's pretty small, but it's perfect. It's got a little booth in it. My desk to put everything on it. Put everything together came today, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah, so it's sort of my sort of little place where I can go down and hopefully end up doing the majority of my mixing from, and a lot of editing and all that sort of stuff, and maybe a bit of writing and vocal recordings and whatnot, and then use the other studio for the sort of bigger projects and whatnot. But It's really exciting. I've just had to really make sure it's soundproof because we've only lived here a year and we get on with the neighbours really well, and I want to keep it that way.
Keep that relationship in a good place, for sure, man. Yeah, don't we know that? Well, that is very exciting, and sounds like a really crucial step, especially for a lot of people in this profession to kind of start finding new ways to do that work-life balance, for sure.
It seems to be. It's funny since I sort of told a few people about it. Nearly so many other producers and mixers I know in the UK are suddenly saying, "Oh, who built that? I want to get something like this." Because I think the pandemic showed everyone how we have to work differently now, and then it suddenly started to realise that you can do things in slightly different ways. And so I'm sort of fully embraced it.
Where there is a will, there is a way, and there is a Tom Conran to give you all of the virtual acoustic consulting. I get very lucky because I'm like, Tom, how do I fix this?
Yeah, Mitch, that I can fully corroborate that. Even in the States, our studio partner Adam and myself run an acoustical consulting firm, and we've put in so many studios for so many people. At their houses, and like soundproofing is incredibly important. So the air of that feeling is 100%. I think it's like honestly global at this point, but yeah.
It's just also really nice to just be able to have a place where I can set up and I can just wander down the garden, play a bit of piano or play a bit of guitar, and then leave everything set up the way it was, and then just go back to my life again. And I'm really looking forward to that.
And not have to jettison an hour in between those two as a transition period.
But no, so that's what I'm up to at the moment, and I'm trying my best. The problem is, it's just sort of like it's like starting a new studio, so it's another thing of like, what monitors am I getting? What am I doing here? What am I? Before I know it, I'm spending money I haven't got. So I'm trying to be careful so I don't get myself horribly in debt before I start.
Honestly, 'tis the season though. You're like a kid at Christmas again, all over. It never really ends. You're just the toys you want in the catalog start to get way more expensive.
Oh, totally, definitely.
We'll talk a bit more about that in our Gear Candy segment, I'm sure. For now, that's amazing, dude. And I know obviously the work-life balance is precious, so we have invited you here. And you were gracious with your time to come and talk to us about a record that you had a heavy hand in that came out back in 2015 with Mr. Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes. And that album is called Blossom. First of all, an awesome record, an incredible record. And I know we have listeners over in the UK, but obviously, a large portion of them are from the States as well. And I just kind of wanted to start and frame everything with some context, usually, again, because that's often very important in what led you to this project and, being a part of it. Right. And for people that don't know the history of Frank as an artist and his former bands, he was in a band many years ago called Gallows, very big in the punk hardcore scene globally, but also, specifically in the UK. And it's interesting because this project, is forged out of, I think, a lot of that history, right? So talk to us a little bit about how you came to know Frank and what led to your involvement with making this record, to start with.
I mean, without going too far back, I've known Frank for a long time, but we were all part of a very similar music scene around sort of where we are. We all sort of live on the various towns on the outskirts of London. Frank was in Hemel Hempstead and I was in Watford, and there was a real big sort of DIY punk rock scene in Watford in particular. And loads of bands came out of there. It was a real sort of hotbed of sort of creativity in all senses. Such, you know what it's like. You know those sort of scenes.
Yeah. Oh, we played the rugby club. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, in Watford.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yes.
I was probably there. That would have been a long time ago.
That was a good one. Somebody stole merch from our table. I think most of the band was pretty inebriated by the end of the set.
That sounds about right.
Last I heard, we got in a van and were whisked away by a friend right before like someone's older brother and their gang came back with golf clubs to beat the shit out of us. So that's the one, right? That's the rugby
That's
club.
the one.
Yeah, okay.
There was always a threat of something happening. But yeah, so there you go. So that was the music scene that it sort of so it was promoted. There was gigs on all the time, and then I got into I was playing in loads of bands, and I started putting on some of the shows with my friends, 4 mates of mine, and we started putting on shows. Some of them at the rugby club that I can't believe you played there. That's amazing.
Well, that was many years ago.
Many years ago, I was going to say for both
sticks.
of us.
Yeah.
But I got to know the guys in Gallows because we used to put them on every now and then. They always did really, really well, and then from that, I've always been playing in bands and been interested in recording and producing. It's something I've done in sort of parallel. There wasn't many people in our sort of town that did much production, so I just started recording bands any way I could. So a lot of the bands in the area I'd sort of work with at some time. So with Gallows, for example, a friend of mine worked with them on their first album. Actually, a bandmate of mine worked with them on the first album. But when they came around to the second album, I did some demos for them because... and then, we sort of, Frank and I and the rest of the bands have sort of been friends since then, really. So how it sort of, without going into loads of detail, basically after sort of Gallows disbanded, before Frank left, the band continued, but Frank left. He started a band called Pure Love, which was much less punk, more sort of rock bands. And I ended up being the sort of live guitarist for that. So they did the record with Gil Norton in the States. And then they would tour, and then whenever they would be touring, I'd go out and play sort of rhythm guitar I think we did that for about 3 years. And in between that, when I wasn't on tour, I was recording bands and EPs, demos, albums, whatever I could, And then that band sort of came to its end. And Frank went into tattooing because that's what he's always done, and I just threw myself fully into sort of producing, really. And I just thought that was it. I thought, that was fun to do a load of touring and be involved with that. But I was sort of focused fully on production. And then I don't know if it was maybe about 6 months, maybe even a year after that finished. Yeah, I was chatting to Frank and he just said, I've been writing some songs with my friend Dean. We really want to record them. But we want to keep it, we don't want to make a big deal out of it. Just do it for a bit of fun. Would you be up for it? So I was like, yeah, definitely. I'm well up for it. So we asked Mem, who was the drummer who played in the band Pure Love previously. He's a fantastic drummer, and got him in. And basically that sort of started what was Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, basically. So Frank and Dean were sort of writing these songs. And then they came to the studio. And initially I was sort of going to come into recording and I was like, well, have you got a bass player? And they were like, well, we haven't got anyone to play bass. So I was like, cool, well, I'll do it then, And it was just the four of us from that point onwards. And... we basically, from that point, we started recording the debut album before anyone even knew the band existed, which is a sort of, as opposed to sort of doing the thing where you go out and you sort of do the odd track here and there, we were like, let's just, I think the idea was just shut ourselves away, make something exactly as, as Frank and Dean and we all wanted on our terms. And then that'd be the record, So that's how it sort of got there, really, to be honest.
Oh, that's marvelous. I love that too. And I think it's very easy now, especially nowadays, to, there's a tendency to kind of, hey, quick one track there, quick one track there, kind of just keep pushing them out and dripping them all out. But that's so admirable to kind of establish a full holistic vision by just saying we're doing a full record right here, because I think it offers you a lot more flexibility and freedom of where you can go with that project, right? And so I think that's really interesting. When Frank and Dean came to you, and said, "Hey, we have these songs." What were the songs? What was the form? How fleshed out were they? Were there songs? Was this like a kind of write and record in the moment? What did that look like in terms of what they came into the process with?
As I remember, they were pretty fully formed songs. I think everything was there. I mean, I think Dean and Frank were demoing stuff themselves, just sort of just guitars and vocals. But then we wanted to sort of get it together quickly. So it was very much a case of, we'd sort of listen to demos, and then we'd end up all staying in the room, and then me and Men would sort of figure out what we were going to do, and we play through the song a few times, but we wouldn't really overplay it very much. It'd literally be to the point where we were like, right, we sort of know it, and then we'd record it. And that's pretty much how every single track on the album was made. The whole sort of point was, I think, because I think it was very much of its time and where everyone was as musicians, and certainly where sort of Frank was. I think he'd been, part of this band that was. It was very, very different stylistically, and I think this was meant to be a much more rawer sort of thing. And I think that there was a lot of spontaneity to it, not like really overthinking things, but making sure we captured the sort of the feeling and the energy. I think the main thing that we sort of discussed when we started was, we've got these songs. I think they're sounding really good, but we had a bit of a chat about, where, like you do when you're starting a record. Yeah, what do you want to try? How do you want to do things? What's your sort of thought process? With this, it was almost like seeing a punk band in a venue somewhere play the best gig ever, but nothing's like over processed. We sort of, in my eyes, I wanted to hear, like I listened to a lot of this sort of, you see like a lot of stuff on the radio, for example, certainly a lot of sort of rock music and punk music and metal music. It can sonically start sounding quite similar because a lot of people do quite similar things. We were like, we want it to sound completely different, but we want to sound just as big and just as powerful, and it almost to be quite a statement. So when it comes on, they're either going to love it or hate it. It'll be that sort of, I think that was the sort of thing, at least in my mind anyway. I always thought, if you can make something that really had its own identity. Like I love the idea with records where, we've probably all got records. We know that there's probably songs that we haven't heard that were thought about for albums that we loved. And you can recognize them by the production because it's got that vibe and that feel. And that's what I wanted to go for with this. And I think all the band was sort of on the same page. So we sort of, nothing's to click. There's no sample replacement on any of it. Barely any editing. I don't think there's any editing on the drums and bass. I don't think there's any editing on any of it really. I think what we did, we just got in the room and kept playing until we were like, well, okay, that felt like a good one, Now, obviously, there's two guitar tracks, so we ended up, retracking bits of guitar here and there that either for tuning reasons or to double up parts. A lot of the vocals we tracked, as we were doing it. But again, there's always little bits you might go in and just fix and sort out. But on the whole, the performances of the record were genuine. There was like a snapshot in time way of doing a record, which I really love. And I think is something that that you don't really get the opportunity to do much now. I think everyone sort of it takes quite a lot to be able to say, yeah, we're just going to track it as it was and have that commitment to what you're doing, And yeah, there will be bits where it might speed up, and yeah, there will be those bits. But if you take all those elements out, it's a different record, and that's not what we sort of wanted.
Yeah. Do you think that because of Frank's history and your history, having been in so many bands, worked with so many projects, that instilled a bit of confidence to allow yourselves to just open up and grind through this and present this kind of like raw, energetic vision, and to not be too afraid to like kind of try to sugarcoat or overly refine a lot of things? Do you think that had something to do with it, or was that is that kind of baked into the DNA of how Frank and maybe yourself approach stuff?
I mean, I love I sort of love the idea of production. I love the sort of, really getting into things, but I also love the snapshot of time element of it. I love something I really love about a lot of old records. You feel like you're sort of stepping back in time when you listen to them because it was those people in the room. I think that was something that really excited all of us. We've been playing together a lot previously, so we knew, me and Mem had played a lot together. Dean, not so much, but he was very similar. We gelled really well. I think the main reason is there was no pressure. Nobody knew we were doing this album. Like, there was nobody, literally nobody knew. We just said, let's just keep it between us. Because the minute you start sort of saying anything to anyone, there's an expectation. And the minute you start saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, suddenly people start talking. We didn't say anything to anyone. So we just shut ourselves away and started working on this record because there was no, and so it was fun, but it was also quite a sort of cathartic experience for everyone, I think, because it was a sort of a good sort of point of change for a lot of people involved in it. But also there wasn't that pressure of worrying about anything like that. If it didn't work, it didn't work, and no one would have known anyway, like it was
right,
sort of,
right.
Yeah, and that was really nice. And I don't think you get that opportunity very much in bands because once the ball starts rolling, everyone knows what's going on and it becomes this thing. But that very, very early sort of point where no one's really involved and you don't even know. I mean, obviously Frank had a sizable reputation at that point. So people were very interested in what he was doing, but because nobody knew about it, we were able to sort of have that space of doing things how we wanted. And we had certain things like the entire way through the album, I didn't edit out any of the silences. So all the mics are open all the way through, just to give it the feel like you can when there's one guitar and there's another, there's just the sound of the amps just all the time. And there's breathing all the way through. I don't cut any breaths out. There's bits where, you can hear Frank moving around, but they're the things that make it give it a vibe to me, wow. And it's so easy to clean that stuff up, and it was quite nice to be able to do that. And obviously, as you go, so that's why I really like the record. It also posed quite a few. It was quite challenging for me in the perspective of playing live while engineering and producing all at the same time.
Oh, dude, we will believe me. That is on our list of what how you wear the hats. There's a lot to unpack there that you just mentioned, and I'm going to try my best to remember and just like put a pin in a few of those little nuggets of wisdom because I think they're really important and really tend to be very valuable, especially in the context of rock music and capturing rock performances. The first thing I'll kind of go backwards and talk about how you left all the mics open and you didn't over sterilize, as I'll call it, the tracks as a whole, which is instinctual for a lot of engineers, producers. I do it. I'll get tracks. Tom will get tracks, I'm sure you do, to mix, and you'll send something back and someone will be like, hey, that was a bad edit. Can you take that breath out? Can you take, clip the end of that phrase, or like, that guitar hum, can you just mute that out for us? That was sloppy or whatever. But I love it because those are the things that you hear at a live show. Those are what put you in that element. Those are what give you that real depth. And I think, even just putting this record on again to kind of, throw myself back into it, right, ahead of this call, it has this depth to it. There's power, there's weight, it's loud, but there's a depth to it. Like you feel like you're standing in the middle of the band in a room in that way. And I think, you know what I mean? And I mean, you're giving me the thumbs up, right?
That's what I was going for. That's exactly what I wanted. So it's nice to hear.
And it does that, but it only is allowed to do that by the sum of all of those parts, right? And I love that because, Frank was not probably like confined to a tight whisper room, with like an overly, I don't know, we can get into the specifics of what you track stuff on, but it didn't need to be, even if it was, a $50,000 vintage, large diaphragm compressor, microphone, like that almost would have taken one of Frank's superpowers away from him in an interesting way. So the way you describe that dynamic of all y'all kind of there and hearing some of that pacing, the breaths, the amp noise, and leaving that all there is awesome because it captures that real snapshot, almost like you're making a live record, and live records, anybody that listens to them, they have their own energy. So it's like you made a live record, but without the crowd. And that has a completely different feeling to it than an overly pristine, record would. Right. So I love that happened. And then the other thing that I want to very quickly mention as well, because I love the way you kind of stated this is, of course, expectations of it and not having expectations because nobody knew, but the freedom and confidence to kind of go into something and not have it be compared to something else, as a new project and establishing a new footing, a new foothold. I think that allows you, working very quickly is something that you mentioned as well. And I see a lot of, bands, musicians, I've been guilty of this plenty throughout our career of just beating a dead horse demo to death and trying to like redo, recut, whatever. And by the time you actually get in the studio, you're not sure if you even like or maybe hate the song, and you there's no objectivity left. You're like, I don't even know if this is good. I just know that this is exactly how it is now. And you fought against that by making sure you moved really quickly and instinctually and didn't overthink a lot of those choices. And I love that. And this is what I wanted to mention, and Tom and I loved this on a previous episode. We had an artist by the name of Quentin Brock come on and talk about how when he had the band come in the studio, he actually didn't even share the songs with the band ahead of time, really. He wanted to just show them there while they're in the studio, learn it real quick, and then just kind of go. Because if you sat with it for 2 days, 3 days longer, you're going to make completely different decisions. You're going to maybe go past that like sweet spot. And that's what you hit on this. And I love that. So I just wanted to back up and say that. But I know Tom, Tom, fire away, because I know you got a ton more.
Yeah. Dude, Mitch, so you're wearing so many hats for this record. You're playing bass, you're doing production, you're engineering. Can you talk to us about, like, if you don't want to get into like specifics of like how everything was set up, totally cool. But like, would love to know, like, going in, like, where your head was at to like capture it like the way it was captured. Like, were there any techniques that you were using that were like, this is how I maintain the energy, this is what I'm doing to, as like on the engineering side, to not take away from this sterilization? So yeah, if you could speak on that, would love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, on the point of it, of just keeping things moving, I think a lot of that is probably down to sort of Frank's energy in just, right, that's done, let's move on. There's just that always, not to be like the minute he's got the energy or the right feel, then we were good. The minute the guys, all of us, to be honest. Now, we had it set up. So, and it was very, very similar to what you said then about how, Dean and Frank have been playing the song. Me and Mem, we'd get I think we might have had some demos knocking about. Then we'd get in a room, we'd play them out a few times, figure out what would come to us, drum fills, bass parts, bits we're going to lock in on, how that's going to work, do that bit of pre-production, and then just start doing takes together. And then that would be it. We just sort of go, that was the one. And we had it set up in the way that, my studio we did in Watford, it's a drum kit, obviously mic'd up. Then I was sitting right next to Mem. All my bass stuff was DI'd because I didn't have any booths to put, Same thing we did with guitar. I think we might have had a guitar amp mic'd up in another room, or we had it. I can't remember what we did then, but we had the three of us in that room, and then we had Frank in. There's a sort of booth, but that's where the Pro Tools rig was. So it's basically my control room. It's like quite small. So Frank was in the control room with an SM7 and looking at us. And what would end up happening is I'd just sort of run in the control room, check all the mics, check everything's rough, check drums are still tuning's all right, check everything's sounding, everyone's headphones are good, run back, hit record, run back in the room, pick up the guitar, and go for it, basically. One of the things was about, it feeling like, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I work with bands in the studio, sometimes I want to try and create the environment that's very similar to what they're used to. If they're used to playing as a band in a room, they've got that in their head. I find with a lot of bands, if you put them in a very different environment, doing what they do really well, it tends to make them close up a little bit because it's unfamiliar territory, you know. Now, obviously, like Frank, Dean, and Mem, they're really experienced, you know, in the studio anyway. But we were at home playing together, you know, and that's what sort of worked. So in theory, it was quite stressful because I'm sitting there thinking, this take's really good. I hope that low tom stays in tune before the end of the song, you know, or like I hope that, or, you know, but there's nothing, or, you know, I hope everyone's tuning's good, or that's good. But what was nice about it was when you're playing bass along with a drummer, you just have that moment where you get to the end of the song and everyone looks up and just goes, that was the one. You know, when there's that unspoken, just everyone in the room just goes, that's the one. And that is the album is that. The album is 10 songs of that, you know, 10 songs of people going, no one, yep, everyone good. Then everyone just sort of looks up. And then you might try another one. Most of the time, I think if it got to that, we were like, yeah, cool, next. What's the next one we're doing, you know?
As music fans, we know that the records we love are more than just something we listen to, right? Over time, they become a part of us and a part of our identity, and nobody knows this better than the people at Rockabilia, the best online shop for band merch, hands down. For more than 30 years, Rockabilia has offered the largest selection of officially licensed music merchandise available around the world. They do it all, from authentic concert t-shirts to band hoodies and posters, and even accessories from your favorite iconic artists. They do hats, backpacks, bags, pins, belts, you name it, they have it, as well as exclusive access to limited edition designs that you can only get through them and the artists that they partner with. Maybe you missed the merch table at a recent show and you're looking to treat yourself. Maybe you're looking to treat somebody else in your life with a gift card. Or maybe you're looking to outfit the children in your life with some new gear, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Yes, they even have accessories for your pets. They have it all, so just head over to rockabilia.com or follow the link in our show notes, and for a limited time, all Record Process listeners can receive 10% off their order just by entering the code ROCKRECORD. That's all one word, ROCKRECORD, at checkout. So we are extremely proud to have the people at Oxford Pennant as an official sponsor of the Record Process again here on Season 5. And I'm here to tell you about their new pennant and flag customizer. It's real simple. All you have to do is head to oxfordpennant.com to make your own custom flag on demand. Simply type in your favorite phrase, inside joke, lyric, whatever you want, approve the preview, and Oxford will print, sew, and ship your flag straight to you from their beautiful headquarters in sunny Buffalo, New York. Creating and ordering your own custom flags from Oxford Pennant is actually so easy and affordable now that I'm concerned I'll have to start paying off my co-host Tom just to prevent him from putting every dumb thing I say this season on a flag. Seriously, I wouldn't put it past him. But with great power comes great responsibility, as we know, and that's exactly what Oxford Pennant is giving you here. All you have to do is head to oxfordpennant.com, search Customizer, and let the designing begin. Dude, we need to come up with a name for that phenomenon, because we have referenced that moment even when you're talking about like writing with a band in the room or recording something live. Mitch, maybe you can help us with this, because this is a phenomenon that, like, that look up when you're done the end of a take or done trying a section of music, if you're writing whatever it is, and there's no actual verbalization between band members. You're totally right. It's a look, you just know, and you're like, all right, let's go to lunch. Great. Like, that rips. That's the moment, right?
But that's the beauty of it, and that's the thing. You know, that's what you want to. That's what you want to get, and you know, you can. And from a performance, ultimately, I don't know. You know, music's about, you know, creating an emotional response to something. So you know, if you're trying to do that in the studio, you've got to have that yourself. You know, and I think that can be sometimes. I think sometimes I'm including myself in this as producers. You can, out of fear sometimes, and out of sort of the process and out of the workflow and out of what we all, you know, have got used to doing, you start going down these typical processes, but you start to, and I sort of try to not let myself do that too much, because you sort of limit those moments happening, whereas what was really nice about this process was I was in a room with my friends, really good musicians. We really liked the songs. There was no pressure. It was a really perfect environment. So actually, even though I had the sort of hat of like, producing, engineering and playing, it didn't actually feel that stressful. It felt quite fun. And it was a good time. And the minute, like I said, the one thing that made it nice as well is the idea that by doing it in that nature, this is a debut album of a new band. You can give yourself those limitations. And the band has grown and changed drastically since that first album, because the first album is so raw and to the point. We were like 2 guitars left and right, bass, drums. That is it. We're going to keep the same guitar sound all the way through the record. The guitar sound doesn't change. The bass sound changes a couple of times. It just gets a little bit cleaner, but mostly it's disgustingly distorted the entire way through.
Yes.
Vocals have got there was a conscious point of being, let's make the vocals sound really raw and really distorted and really in your face. Some people loved it, some people hated it, but it gave it a sound, and it really suited at that point. And that was the record. And the mixing it was almost, it was the same component parts. It was more about how you played and how you played sections that made the difference, not what sound you did, because we didn't really allow ourselves the luxury of going, oh, well, let's chuck on a load of guitars on that chorus, or to make that. It was like, well, how do we do that in the room, So it was a sort of quite an old school way of making a record, but I loved it. I'd love to, I sort of, the more I'm talking about it, the more I'd like to see something like it again, to be honest, because I'd love to. I think I've moved a bit. I haven't done something in that way for a little while, but I really enjoyed it. But I think you've got to have great musicians, and you've got to have a shared sort of view of where it's going and what it could be. I think you've got to have the right people, definitely. And for that moment, everyone that was there, it was exciting. And it was really fun. And I think when bands start off, they all start off exciting and really fun, don't they? And then as things go on, as they become, as they become businesses and they become more people are relying on it and it becomes this big thing, I think being able to have those periods is trickier because it's, more is riding on stuff, And I think that situation, it was like there was sort of no expectations because nobody knew what we were doing. So it was quite great, really.
Dude, that's so well said, Mitch. And I think making sure that you don't overly concern yourself with dotting the I's and crossing the T's as a producer, engineer, or even, artist and player in the studio, like, because that stuff can take you away from the overall instinct and like your gut core reaction. What you kind of describe is like, you are the first line of like, is this eliciting a reaction in me and the other people that I just created that with in that moment, and that's the moment we were talking about. And sometimes you can get further away and go down those rabbit holes of, well, could the bass have a little bit more top end? Is that tom a little too muffled? Is it not? You know what I mean? Like, do I like that?
Well, I didn't have the opportunity to. What was also nice, I didn't have the opportunity to do that. It's a little bit like recording a live gig, like you say. I've mixed loads of live recordings with people, and you just hope that there's a mic somewhere near the thing you want to hear. Like you sort of don't give yourself and by creating those limitations, you're forcing yourself to be more creative with how any problems you do come up with. But also, there's that thing as well of by saying, that like, it wasn't that you're leaving in necessarily bits that were mistakes or anything. If there's anything went wrong, we'd do it again. It wasn't that it was like, oh yeah, we just did 3 takes and that was it. We were really tough on ourselves about what we did. But so, the good take was everyone playing, the best they could, and it would be tight and it would be there. And if there was anything wrong with it, we just bang it out again. But I think it was that constant moving, I think that was really nice and sort of kept everyone on their toes. And what's nice is that, there's bass parts, there's drum parts, that were thought of in the take, you know, and I like what you did there. That's cool. Now, I don't know. It might never have been played again like that again. You know, I'm sure. I don't know if, you know, and same thing for me. I'd just be like, oh, I've done this, whatever bass part, and that's now on the record, you know. But then that's how, you know, in the 70s, you listen to loads of records. You hear bass play, you think, what is the bass player doing sometimes when you listen to some stuff? Because it's probably just one take where they just go, oh, I'm just going to do this for a bit now. And then that ends up being, you know, the record, you know. And I think we lack a bit of that.
He was half drunk because he spent the whole day sitting in the other room, and then they were like, all right, we're ready for you. He's like, oh.
Yeah, no, totally.
No. And what you're kind of describing with that is amazing. It's something that a good friend of ours, Philly guy, Phil Nicolo, who owns Studio 4 and has made a ton of killer records. He mixed a record for us many years back. But I remember having a conversation with him. He called them eye pokes. He's like, I don't want to get rid of all the eye pokes. The eye pokes are sometimes the best character moments and the best signature things about all the records that you love from the last like 5 decades. It's that string squeak that's like just on the right beat and hits just the right harmonic. You could never do it again if you tried for days. But it's just awesome. Leave it, right? You know,
we've all had it with. I'm sure we all have it. There's not a producer in the world that hasn't had. Oh, it doesn't sound as good as a demo. I just can't get the performance to sound. I mean, how many demo vocals have I used on records because for whatever reason they can never replicate the same thing. I think there's definitely something to be said for that. I also think that it's really the idea of something being, you know, right or wrong or good or bad is so subjective. Like, you know, I listen to stuff I've worked on and I can pick it apart and I can visualize the Pro Tools session sometimes. You know, it takes me quite a while to get that out of my head. But I listen to loads of records and I take everything on face value. That's what they intended. So that's what I'm hearing. They might think it's a mistake or they might not like it, but you know, and that's the thing I think you have to also realize that sometimes, you know, you just got to trust in the people around you and the band you've got. I think keeping it moving was the main thing that made it sort of not have that chance of being able to constantly go, oh, I'm going to re-record that again. I'm going to re-record, because, you know, it's never a good place to be, because you end up just going round and round and round and round in circles. And like you said earlier, at the end of it, you're like, well, this is just it now. You know, I don't know if it's got good or worse, or I know it so well. It just is that now.
There's no excitement left.
You know,
yeah.
We've all had records
Mitch,
like that.
Was there any like let's keep rolling with this eye poke thing. Was there any like eye poke moments that like on the record that you're like, man, like whether it be like engineering or playing, like, oh, that one.
Well, like bits that I'd be a bit like, oh dear, I'd do that again or something.
Yeah.
I think some. I don't know actually if there is. Yeah, actually, I'm pretty confident with it. I'm pretty happy with it. There's bits where, you know, you can sort of hear that everyone's digging in so hard that everything's going slightly sharper at parts, you know, and you hear like, you know, you just sort of hit. But then I hear bits and I'm like, that's probably tuning's a bit out on that bit. But then I think, no, if we got rid of that, it would have taken away from that the sense of it, you know. Whereas, you know, if I'd sat there and so there's no sort of moments where I think, oh, I don't really like, you know, how that sort of came about, because I think we did, even though we recorded it quickly, as I said, we had quite high sort of expectations of ourselves. But I don't know. Did you hear anything? I don't know.
Oh no! I was gonna say like prefacing. Yeah, no,
dude. Mitch, that is the perfect descriptor, actually. Like when you're leaning in on guitar, bass, or whatever, and how everything just cheats in the same way when a vocalist is really pushing and they'll tend to cheat a little sharp. But if the band as a whole does it all together at the same moment, if you try and go back and tune that vocal, God forbid, it's going to sound bad.
That's
You know, if you try and retune the guitars down and cheat them up, the rest of the song is going to sound flat. It has to work organically in that moment. And that you mentioned no click. And in that case, it's like it can float because it's all floating together. And I think that is such a perfect example of how no one's going to listen to that record and be like, are those guitars sharp? No, because the bass is also there and the drums are cooking a little bit heavier.
Well, that's the thing. I think there's that thing as well of like, when you are doing something totally off click, and you're doing it in the room and you don't really, it is all moving as one, like as a bass player, it's hard to sometimes play bass along with a drummer that hasn't recorded a click, because I use a lot of visual cues when I'm playing, and you're there together in the room and you move together. Whereas when you're both in the room together and you're all doing it at the same time, the chorus might be a bit quicker, or it might drop down into the middle eight or whatever it is, but that's naturally how it's feeling for all of us. And, I've plenty of times I've worked with artists, figured out what tempo their song is, got them to play it, and then realized that they're finding it tricky on certain sections because they're used to pulling back a bit at that point, or they're used to pushing thing. And that poses a real sort of question as a producer. It's like, do we fight against that? Do you say, no, you're going to be gridded, or you're going to stick to this tempo? Or do you go, no, that's part of it, what they do there, I'm going to run with it and let's see where we end up. Right. Now that choice can be quite a bold one early on in a project, because you sort of know going back once you've made that call. But I definitely think if you've got the right musicians and you've got the right people, I think you can afford to do that. And I listen to it now and I don't notice, I don't think, but if I put a metronome on, I'd be like, yeah, this is sort of moving all over the place, but it's cool. And it wouldn't sound as good if it had been sort of quantized and totally, like everything gridded and whatnot. That was sort of what I was saying about going back to like hearing it on the radio and it sounding different to a lot of other things else that was out at the time, because everything was so super produced, super, super gridded, super sampled up. And then I was like, well, I want it to sound more exciting than that, but I also want it to sound nothing like it as well. I want it to have its own sort of vibe and be a punk rock record, not be, because that's the funny thing is that, for a genre of music is so, is meant to sort of not have any rules. There's a lot of rules now, to production, and there's an awful lot of things that are sort of thought about. And I sort of thought, no, I just think you should just, record it in the room, which weirdly became an odd thing. And then people were like saying, that's awesome you did it that way. And that becomes a rarity when really it seems a bit round the wrong way,
Right.
But it all depends. It's all, I think it was, I'm really glad I got to do it because, I'm really proud of it for that reason, really.
Dude. Well, and I think also what's interesting, so Frank was obviously singing along with these takes in the, in the control room as well. And I think that's sometimes the secret sauce there is when you have a really strong vocalist that knows how they want to present these ideas vocally, right? And is doing it with the band. Y'all could hear that. And I'm sure in an interesting way, because this is where I think, and Tom's seen this. I'm sure you've seen it when it comes to like tempo map world or whatever, where you can really get in trouble where you're like, well, who's really leading the charge here? Is it the vocal that is like above all? Because for a lot of music, like rock music, pop music, you want to make sure your vocalist is in their like strongest possible wheelhouse to present that idea and perform that. But then there's a lot of other music where it's just like, but if the whole track feels sluggish, then something's weird and it's this jostle back and forth. But if you have someone like Frank and you're listening to those vocals in real time, kind of go, the rest of the band is responding and says, okay, Frank's pushing vocally. It makes you want to push a little bit more. Okay, cool. Yeah. He's like kind of like leaning back. And I love that. I think that's how that probably came to work out so well in your favor on this one.
Yeah, I think it probably did. I think without even realizing it. And I think it's obviously the history of playing together and knowing each other well and sort of, there's definitely an element of certainly between like me and Mem, because we'd done some tours together. I think following Frank and hearing everything back when you're playing, with sounds that were sounding cool, was really nice. And I think once we heard the first song, and we were like, this is gonna work, as long as we've all got the right mindset for it. But I don't think, as I said, I think it's a sort of debut album thing. I think it's a hard thing to do later on. I think it's definitely like when you haven't got, because it is a bit of a risk. It was a bit of a like, this might not work at all. That we might have to do it a slightly different way or whatnot. But there was a real belief, certainly amongst Frank and Dean and myself and Mem, that it was just the four of us just going to see what we come up with. And it was sort of early on. It was very much like, this is just for fun. This is just for us to just do something that will I don't think obviously you never do anything not wanting to take it seriously. Everyone wanted to take it seriously, but now you look at the band now. How long are we talking about? Like 7 years on, and it's just grown from strength to strength, which is amazing.
Oh, I know. I'll get
change, but been able to move from that place to lots of different places. So to sort of start in this quite simple, stripped down, very raw, very sort of elemental sort of way, it means you can then, with every album, different things are sort of changing.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Actually, interestingly enough, but right before this call, I learned that I'm going to get to see that live next year, and I have something to look forward to see Frank. We're doing 2,000 Trees over there.
Oh, awesome.
And I just saw that, that they're playing that as well. So this gives me a whole new context, which is very exciting to it. And you're right. It's fun to like kind of plant that flag in the ground, but no, it's going to be the start of an evolution as well, just like anything else. So you mentioned, to kind of wrap up here on the whole thing, you mentioned when, you heard that first song and you're like, this is going to work, right? You got that feeling and you're like, okay, cool. Now we're doing it, and this is going to happen, and it reinstills that like new level of confidence and kind of drive with everybody. Looking back now, what were some of the moments across the record that you kind of like those like head up eye contact moments, or maybe when you were finishing it back, or in the moment you all tried something and knew it worked? What are some of your personal favorite moments and memories on the record that if you had to point out any that were really like special and really hit that impact point for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Now this is where I realise it's like 7 years ago, and my memory is not what it was. But I think when we came up, I think generally when we came up, when you're doing something, when you're working with a band doing their first thing, and you're lucky enough to be playing on it as well, you can find the recipe you can sort of get the blueprint of the sound of it. And I think the thing that I really liked and always wanted to explore was how much weight and power the bass carries in there. The guitars are actually quite clean. They're really clean all the way through. All the drive comes from the bass. So we did spend a bit of time discussing what we were going to do. And the first time we sort of heard it back with this sort of massive, I forget what, I think it was a Marshall Governor I had, but then I also had a Sansamp and something else. It's sort of like really big sounding bass guitar, played really aggressively. I mean, I was playing with a pick with incredibly massive strings. I was like blisters all on my hands while I was doing it. I remember that. And then, but with these guitars, like, hearing that mixture of everything back, thinking it's got its own sound, like without us, even just by us sort of doing what we instinctively feel is a sort of right thing. That was a real moment. There's also there's a song that I think it's the last song on the album called "I Hate You," which is it's very different to the rest of the record. Put it this way, like the rest of it's obviously really sort of in your face, and this is it's basically a blues song, to be honest. It sort of rounds off the album, and it's become I don't know if they still play it now, but it became a real live sort of favourite. And the lyrics are brilliant, and it's Frank. It's very funny, but it's a real sort of sing along moment as well on the live shows. And that you sort of knew that when you were recording it, you were like, "Oh, people are gonna this will work." And there's another song called Juggernaut as well, which is the first track on the record. And already I was knowing Frank and having played many shows with him, I was thinking, I can see this. Like when we were playing it, I remember thinking, I can see this live. Like, I know what's going to happen. I know, how that'll be received. So they were sort of exciting moments to sort of be, and because they were sort of coming as fully formed songs, just played quite simply and to the point, you could sort of see it quite clearly, quite early on.
Oh yeah,
that's the thing, I suppose. Without but yeah, I think they were two songs that I particularly remember thinking, they'll I could sort of visualize it before we'd even played a gig. Which is crazy, having done all that and then not, our first gig was we'd already recorded the album. We hadn't even played a gig together in that guise, So it was kind of fun. But yeah, I'd say those sort of bits really.
Oh, brilliant, dude! What an interesting take. I mean, that's why I asked the question, because it's, you're a player on the record, but you're also in charge of putting it together and kind of being at the forefront of crafting and molding that sound. But dude, when right, and that's such a great point. We'll go back to it, and I think that's a fitting way to kind of end this look back at it, because I think that's the overarching kind of story here with it, is just letting it happen and instinctually going for it, and not getting in your own way, and keeping that excitement and that pace. And namely, I think, you mentioned those two songs specifically having that like aha moment, and you can almost picture the future. We call them, like, whether it's like, oh, this one's going to be a straight up room decimator, like, or this, what we, I've heard referred to as like, oh, that's the tattoo lyric. You know what I mean? Like that's that's the one that sticks, right? And you just sometimes it, you hear it back, you hear the first vocal take on it, or that section of a song, you're like, oh no, that's just that crushes me, and it's such a brilliant moment for an artist, producer, anybody being involved in a record, when you hear something come together and you can almost, it's this like crystal ball moment. So that's awesome, dude. Mitch, thank you so much for sharing that with us. What an awesome story. You should be very proud of the record. Where can everybody hear what else you're doing? Because obviously this is by no means the only thing that you have been a part of in your incredible career. So if people want to check out the rest of your stuff and keep up to date with you, where can they find you?
I have a website, which is www.thomasmitchener.co.uk, and that's got all the stuff I've worked on. It's got all my sort of discography and show reels of stuff I've done. Yeah, that's where most of it all is, to be honest.
No, that's perfect.
Amazing.
And I'm on Instagram as well, which is probably where I post the most about stuff. I'm trying to get better. I'm so bad when I'm in the studio at like suddenly thinking, like leaving a project and thinking, I haven't got one photograph of me having done this, or like anything to. I thought about that the other day. People were like, have you got any photos of like, you with that band? I was like, no, none actually, because I haven't. But I'm trying to get better. But so my Instagram is gonna get better, I promise.
Okay. Well, on the topic, should we not get our hopes up? Do you have any photos from when y'all were making this record by any chance? Because it was pretty secret, like you mentioned. So it was a clandestine operation. Okay.
Well, we did just another sort of elaborate on the first album. They did another thing that happened. If you've got like moment, I can just tell you what sort of happened after.
Yeah.
Oh, we always have a moment.
5 years after the album was finished, just at the beginning of the pandemic, basically, they were going to do a sort of reissued version of the record. And when we did the first Rattlesnakes tour, I was toying with the idea of building like a live recording rig with like mic splitters and everything to take. Basically, it's just something to do as fun, just to sort of offer to bands. Like, I'll come and record your show, and and then I can mix it. So I asked the guys at the time, I said, do you mind if I just bring this recording rig on tour with us? It's literally just some splits, and it'd just be at the side of the stage. And I recorded every night of our first tour. So even when we were playing gigs, I still had a laptop next to me, and I'd like every now and then when like it would get too hot and the hard drives would stop working, I'd have to restart the computer mid-gig and stuff. And then and I'd sort of forgotten about this. I'd totally forgotten about it until it came around about this 5-year anniversary. So I went through and recorded that. They found out all the stuff that I'd recorded and made an exact mirror image of the first album, like track listing wise, based on live recordings from the first tour.
Wow.
So there's a deluxe edition of Blossom, which has the studio album, and then it has the exact same track list of tracks from the first tour. And with that, they put out a book of photographs of loads of stuff from the making of the album, and I've got a load of photographs. So there are brilliant photographs of that era. There's not many, to be honest, as we found out when I was trying to find in the studio stuff. But yeah, there is a few. Of,
awesome.
Some of the drum setup and whatnot.
We'll have to try and get those from you.
No, definitely.
Before we put this out, because I think that's a really cool way to add that little extra bit of depth about the story, and and where y'all were at and what it felt like. So yeah, well, I appreciate that, and what a cool idea too, to kind of do a full live version of it, but piece together from different, I imagine, from different shows.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone really records their first tour, do they? Mainly probably for good reason, to be honest, because I listened to the whole tour because I remember walking the dog every day with a different, like, Leeds today or Birmingham, wherever it was, and just being like, nope, can't use that one. No, that's just for various reasons of, whatever was happening. But it was quite nice to have that, because again, from I think the fans' perspective as well, as some of those people that came on that first tour then followed the band all the way through. So, and it was quite nice to be able to say this was from literally the first tour we ever did. But it was totally by accident. I was just testing out if this live rig would work. And then I never used it after that, because suddenly then everyone had digital mixing desks and was recording stuff really easily. So it sort of made my big splitters recording photo session thing a whole sort of a bit pointless. But no, I'm glad I did it. But there's a book that came out with a load of photos, so I'll get them over to you. Yeah,
please do. Well, we're glad you did. We're glad you grinded through that and do have that. And I'm sure the band's fans are as well. That's a really cool piece. We'll make sure to link to that in the notes as well. Thomas Mitchener, our friend Mitch. Now, we've learned so much, and I can't thank you enough once again for joining us today. Be well, and we'll look forward to catching up soon.
Awesome. Yeah, been a pleasure chatting to you guys. That's been awesome. Thanks a lot.
You'll often hear music producers talk about getting it right at the source. Typically, this means choosing the right player, the right space, and the right gear to capture the precise sound an artist is picturing during the tracking process of a record. Many producers believe that a song is made or broken long before the first note is even laid down in the studio, and that the source of a great recording's power comes from the careful planning and refinement of its underlying lyrics, structure, and arrangement. I think the way this record was made seems to prove both of these ideologies to be completely true, while also offering a third ingredient to the recipe. That ingredient is spontaneity. The full band live tracking approach kept the energy and excitement going the whole time, while also ensuring that they captured the spontaneity of the players responding to each other in real time. And this is a delicate balance to walk. It's really easy to over-prepare and over-analyze and over-refine those initial demos and think yourself out of something that's really intuitive and instinctual. But for this kind of rapid-fire live tracking to work, it does require meticulous placement and planning on the recording front. And with the clandestine nature of this project freeing Frank and the band from the weight of outside expectation, the result was a memorable snapshot into the birth of a massive UK rock juggernaut. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we'll be back next week with another snapshot of a great album right here on The Record Process.